Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desotel, and I'm here with my co host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Joe.
Boy, we are here to wrap up a week that just won't end in lots of twists and turns. We got the update on the quorum. At least as far as we can tell, there's still no quorum for the Republicans to pass their voter suppression bills. And there was a tweet that you did earlier about all the other things that we're killing. Do you want to just go down the quick list of other things that we're not
I
getting
mean,
passed
I
right
think
now?
I listed a few things. I've probably forgotten some. We've got the anti-trans legislation. We've got another abortion ban. There's also a bill that would essentially allow Abbott to outlaw any mask mandates, I guess forever in perpetuity. And so that's also in addition to what they're blocking when it comes to not having a quorum. I know there's also a really bad bail bill that's also out there. But that's, so that's sort of like the crux of this, where, not only are they stopping this horrible voter suppression bill, there's also this just garbage that Republicans are trying to do in the state of Texas that is being prevented with Democrats holding the line. Now we are hearing more and more are breaking that line. But
Yeah, exactly. They're crossing the picket line, unfortunately, one by one. And it seems like they're just cutting deals for personal gain and preservation in some cases. But I don't know how the preservation part's going to work if you don't stand up for the people that you are asking to vote for you.
Joe, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Newsies, but that was a very formative film for me, and it taught me about strikes. It's for folks who don't know, this is a early '90s film about the 1900s paperboy strike in New York
Oh,
City.
wow.
It stars Christian Bale in one of his first roles. I think he was a teenager. I did not know it was going to be a musical. So you
Oh,
can
boy.
you can watch it now on Disney Plus. A shockingly pro-union and workers' rights movie from Disney. But
Right.
anyway, the long story short is this movie taught me about worker solidarity and coming together and
Hmm.
fighting as one. So it is very disheartening, though, to sort of see certain members and members that I will say that I actually just personally liked,
Hmm.
doing this and sort of
Yeah.
going
I
on the
mean,
other
it's
side.
almost like, what's the point? I mean, they left in July, they all walked out and they were so proud of what they did. And now just to come back and let it all happen anyway seems like a bigger waste of time. This whole thing, all the money and all the time. And some of these things, even that the Republicans are trying to pass, like you mentioned, that COVID, um, the COVID mask mandate ban is very unpopular across the whole state. And we see over 60 different jurisdictions who are suing the governor in places like you mentioned before in Paris, Texas, that are quite red and rural, and they're not Austin, Blueberry, or Houston or Dallas. These are small suburban exurban areas across the state of Texas. And a poll I just saw, I believe you actually shared it with me, was that over 70% of Texans want these mask mandates and the schools to protect their children.
They do, and I mean, there's some really hard. I mean, right now there's 500 children that are hospitalized for COVID-19. I believe the Houston, one of their large hospital administrators I saw him on a local channel, basically essentially saying that 19% of the COVID cases they had were children.
Mm,
So, for a long time in this pandemic, it was sort of assumed that were not as affected by this. There's clearly something different with this Delta variant, or,
right.
or perhaps some of the other variants that we're now seeing, where that is not the case. So I think the majority of folks do, though. We virtual learning is not a long-term strategy for children. Being in person in class is the optimal thing, but there's ways to do that are safe. So in my neck of the woods, Dallas, our superintendent, sort of had even after the Supreme Court ruling, he said, we're still doing mask mandates. That's the end of this. And then several ISDs followed. You did mention Paris, and I have to sort of say that they took a very creative approach to this, where they went to a dress code and they said, all right, maybe the governor, attorney general has said we can't do the mask mandate, but hey, we can tell girls that you can't wear a spaghetti strap tank top. So maybe with that same logic, we can also require a mask. And that's the creative loophole that they
Mhm.
found.
Yeah,
But you're
adding
right.
it to the uniform, right? Yeah, very creative.
Yeah, but you're right. It's cities, it's suburbs, it's exurb, it's rural. The
Hmm.
attorney general himself are criminally are let me get this correct. He is indicted for felony securities fraud, and he is under investigation by the FBI for a separate incident for abuse of office and bribery. That attorney general has very helpfully compiled a whole list of all these ISDs
It is
targeted
funny.
like
It,
this.
it it is like a Rorschach test in a way, right? Like you see, he thinks, oh, like I'm gonna expose these people that are breaking the governor's executive order, and in reality, it's like, oh wow, he's just showing how unpopular the governor's executive order really is, and how diverse of an audience that it is offending. And I think that is sort of a canary in the coal mine for these Republicans as they beg Democrats and threaten them with arrests to come back so that they can pass this really unpopular stuff.
I guess this is also the time where we should mention our current governor tested positive for COVID-19. So he is fully vaccinated. He actually received a third booster shot. We don't quite know the timeline on that. And even though he's saying he's asymptomatic, his office was telling us that he's also receiving this antibody treatment from Regeneron.
Mhm.
But so clearly, Greg Abbott is taking all these precautions against COVID while at the same time saying that these local entities can't sort of enforce these precautions. And I have to, I
Mhm.
mean, again, to the point of like 500 children hospitalized for COVID, that is terrifying to me. I'm in North Texas. We ran out of pediatric ICUs several days ago. I know several regions are in the same boat. Multiple hospitals are fully without even adult ICU units. We know that there's just this is not this is not a trivial thing. There's 5 mortuary trucks
Mm.
that were ordered by the governor. We all remember the horrors of what happened in these previous waves. And I guess for me, the thing that I cannot sort of get over is this current wave. It was just so preventable.
Yeah, I mean it's so awful. And you mentioned that the governor's got the Regeneron treatment, which apparently is only available if you are a high level elected official or very wealthy. It costs a lot of money. I'm hearing 6 figures for this treatment. Meanwhile, he's sitting in the taxpayer funded People's Mansion. We got to stop calling it the governor's mansion. Start calling it the People's Mansion, where he's just sitting there quarantined, and he can't even show up in court for all the people that are suing
Yeah.
him because he's in quarantine.
Right. And I will say he tested. So the day they announced that he tested positive, literally less than 24 hours, he was up in Collin County, which is just north of Dallas County, in a very large group, in a large room,
Yeah.
crowded, maskless, looks
Not a person under 75 in that room. I mean, it was
no.
crowd.
But he was also I think with Stevie Ray Vaughan's family the day he
Hmm.
tested positive,
Yeah.
which included some children. Now, thankfully, I think they have since tested negative.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yes, so I will have to. So the governor, there are Regeneron treatment centers that have opened up throughout the state. I guess now Abbott is trying to sort of cover up a little bit. So y'all might recall it's about maybe 10 days ago, Abbott did announce, in addition to getting some more nursing staff or healthcare workers from out of state, as a part of that announcement, they also said that they were doing these Regeneron centers. And so he also announced recently that they were opening up 2 more in addition to those 9 in Beaumont and Odessa.
Mm.
But again, it's a limited supply for that free
Yeah.
Regeneron, the antibody treatment. Now,
So
if you
yeah,
have money, that's a different question.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, fighting the federal government on one hand and then asking them for more, more trucks on the other hand, it's not a good look. And fighting these school districts and counties and cities when you're quarantined yourself with the virus, but getting this fantastic treatment, also not a very good look. And people are starting to catch up and catch on. As I mentioned, a very close friend of mine, his mother, he said, was never been involved in politics, and he just she asked him, "Hey, what's going on with your governor?" And he was just, blown away first that she was even aware of what the governor was doing. And so it seems like this is breaking through to a certain degree beyond the typical left-right politics into every day. And we talk about on this podcast a lot about how can we as an organization break more into culture and more into like everyday lives of people who aren't political, and they're doing it for us because everybody goes to school. Right? Everybody's kids have to go to school.
Everybody goes to school, and Abbott, and I have to say, a lot of the Republicans at the state legislature have pretty much every step of the way been against all of these COVID precautions. I mean, this also goes to a lot of the vaccine hesitancy in our state stems from a lot of misinformation and propaganda that
Yeah.
is really just very right wing.
Yeah.
And I think that is I mean, I had coffee with a friend of mine. We were outside and our safe little distance. And she's a bit more moderately political, especially after 2016. But she was just furious. Like she had some stuff that was getting canceled or postponed that she was really looking forward to, and she was just very livid. She has I think a sister who is very anti-vaccine and is
I mean,
all that stuff that we're all hearing from relatives or loved ones that are in that same boat. And
it's so sad. Yeah. And I don't know how I don't know where these people are thinking, because I'm reading some of the same things you are, and people are saying, oh, y'all are sheep and blah 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 blah, this and that, and the vaccine is dangerous and all this. All you have to do to know is to see that you see Democrats promoting the vaccine, promoting wearing masks. You see Republicans not doing that, but you know that the Democrats who are doing that are vaccinated. And then the Republicans who are doing that, they're also vaccinated.
I mean, Greg Abbott was vaccinated. He got his third booster shot.
I mean, 3.
So this is literally, this was kind of, I actually feel a little bit of whiplash with the booster shot news. A couple of days ago, it was, oh, if you're immunocompromised, this is something to do. And then very recently, it was, all right, actually, there is maybe concern on this. So 8 months after your second shot, for folks who had the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I know y'all are very nervous, but they're still doing those clinical trials. And so I think just be patient. I'm sure y'all will hear some news pretty soon. But clearly Abbott, I mean, with all the stuff he's doing, he's worried about this disease, as one should be. This is
the reports were that he was very scared himself personally, because he's obviously compromised in some way, being in a wheelchair. He doesn't have the same immune effects as other people, and so he was scared. And that's just like, dude, come on, like, you didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, this is how this is a deadly virus, and we're in a pandemic, and that's of course people should be scared and be taking these precautions. And that's what, like, that's what 72% of parents want their kids to wear a mask going to school, and that's for that basic protection, because again, if you're under 12, there is no vaccine for you yet. So that's
yes. I mean, I think I've seen a couple of people say that. And whenever the governor says, oh, it's all voluntary, massive voluntary, do what you feel safe for you. And then people will remind them that, yeah, kids can't get the vaccine, dude. So it is not a choice. And plus, kids are kids. They don't have that adult personal autonomy that, to make those kinds of decisions for themselves. And you're just confusing them and putting them in harm's way in the meantime. And so, Republicans tried to say, they tied everything, almost just completely ignoring the pandemic, trying to say, oh, Democrats need to come back and do their jobs, and they're betraying teachers and blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, teachers are like on our side. Teachers want these mask mandates. You want Democrats to come back so you can ban the mandates that are keeping people safe. And so I find it interesting and ironic also that as Democrats come back and they get closer to a quorum, we now have another Republican state representative who has gotten COVID. And so even if
who was that? Who was at the Capitol, by the way?
Yeah.
There have been two Republican state representatives who've tested positive and have shown up to the Capitol. Now they have gone into a quarantine room, but they have likely interacted with people along the way to that place.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, maybe they're wearing a mask. And so should we assume that if Republicans wearing a mask, it means they're COVID positive because they won't do it otherwise? Or they're, a rhino if they wear a mask or something, or they get vaccinated. So I don't really know what their end game is. But what we're seeing now is this quorum break is starting to push up against the timeline for redistricting. And, sort of the undercurrent conversation that's going on now is like, oh, well, we did this to initially prevent this voter suppression bills from passing, but we're also really coming in and closing on the clock for redistricting. And essentially what that would look like, I guess, is if we run out the clock on this and it gets punted to a federal court, who then it's up to them to determine the maps. And then members ultimately could end up just running in the same districts that they're in now. And given the changes with the COVID and these people being afraid and upset at Republicans, it may actually backfire completely on Republicans and give Democrats the opportunity to take a majority in the House. I mean, of course, it's a lot harder to take the governorship when we don't have a candidate, but at least maybe the House might be up for grabs the next time around, simply out of a forced error on the Republicans' part.
I mean, the redistricting, and we have to say, like, the data itself. So we briefly touched on this the last episode, but with the new redistricting data that was from the census, there was a big fear. I had a big fear that there was going to be a severe undercount for the minority population. If there was an undercount, then Texas is just massively more diverse than what the census showed. But what the new data showed is that 95% of the growth in this state was from people of color. So for every white Texan that was added, there was 11 Hispanics that were added. And actually Asians are, as much as that sounds, Asians are actually the fastest paced growing demographic for Texas. The Black population, their percentage did not, it increased just a little bit, but the sheer number of Black Texans increased. And so
300 something thousand.
Right. So it's just these sort of mind-boggling numbers. I was listening to a webinar earlier today from the National Association of Latino Elected Officials that were sort of going through sort of state by state on that level. And when they got to Texas, they kind of paused and said it would be very hard to gerrymander this state with all this new growth. However, given the Republicans in this state, it is,
they're creative.
They're creative.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we want to note that these things are all connected. The fact that they knew this, they saw that happening. That's why they didn't put any money in the census in the beginning with. Why are they going to put money to count people that would vote against them? Why would they put money in to make it harder for them to gerrymander the state, which is what they want to do now? And so they want to bring Democrats back to restrict voting, make it harder to vote, and then come back and gerrymander the lines, make it easier for them to win after they've done this, their undercounting of all the people of color who have moved to our state. So, I mean, it's layer after layer after layer, and it's all just part of a bigger, the end game for them, which is to consolidate and hold on to that power.
Yeah. It's very cynical though when you think about it. I mean,
Yeah, it's
you
pretty
know, you're
cynical.
basically sort of saying like, oh, a person of color, oh, they must be a Democrat. And that's truly not the case.
It's not. Yeah.
I take some umbrage with some of the coverage that occurred for 2020 about sort of the Latino vote. I don't think it was like this massive shift to Republicans. Now, that being said, there were clearly things that happened in areas of Texas
Hmm.
along that RGV area. We'll talk about that on another episode. But in 2000, I think George Bush had 40% of the Latino vote.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
No. No.
idea
Yeah.
that and actually I think for Asians it was almost half and half on in terms of sort of Democrat Republican. So the idea that if you are a person of color that you're just automatically going to go to the Democrats, that's it's actually almost insulting, I think, in some ways, where you're not giving people agency in that regard.
You're right. And it was done on both sides by Democrats and Republicans, because
Hmm.
for years, Democrats just kind of sat back and said, well, demographics are our destiny. So instead of going out and talking and recruiting, we'll just sit back and wait for enough Hispanics to show up to vote. And then we'll win the state again. And that has not happened. It will not happen. And that, as you mentioned in South Texas, proved that we have to go places, we have to talk to people. And but on the flip side of that, going back to 2003, since you mentioned 2003 is when they did the partisan mid-decade redistricting, for the sole purpose of getting rid of white Democrats, because they knew that if they did that, it would just you would see a contrast where, oh, there's a white party and there's a non-white party. And so they fed into their own BS with that, and thought, okay, well, if we see a person of color, we're not gonna talk to them, go after them, or whatever. Even though there are conservative, minorities who share those conservative values, and it's just a lot easier, I guess, in a narrative, and to just say, well, we know who our people are, and sort of go after them. And then we've seen that accelerated with Trump, with sort of this, you can't say white. A lot of people will say white supremacist sort of stuff that we're seeing, just sort of these dog whistles that we're seeing. And so, hopefully we'll learn something with the census, and hopefully the redistricting process will be better than it has been the last couple of decades. And I don't, on one hand, you can say, well, how much worse can it get on this gerrymandering? But they'll find a way.
They
I trust that they will do everything they can.
It's like that, isn't that the Jurassic Park thing that
Yes,
Jeff Goldblum's character
yes. Life will find a way.
will find
Yeah.
a way. Republicans will find a way. I should note, so we're recording late Thursday on the 19th. The headlines have broken that the quorum was made.
Oh, so awful. But you know what? They can go back. So, if they make the quorum, this is a long process. They can't pass the bill and go to the governor's desk, by the way, which he can't go to right now because he has COVID and he's quarantining. But there's a long process, right? It has to go through that whole process. And so there are going to be opportunities for us and for other grassroots organizations to continue to put pressure on Democrats to do the right thing. And I think what it's going to do is expose that Republicans never wanted Democrats to come back so they could work with them, to pass these bills and take in their thoughts and their opinions and their amendments. But the fact is, they simply wanted their warm bodies there so they could do exactly what they always intended to do. And I think that's what we're going to see here. So hopefully they wise up, and they get run over a couple times when they try to offer amendments, and get laughed off the dais, and then realize that they've been played.
Yes, it does. Yeah, the Charlie Brown, Lucy, and the football situation.
Yeah.
This seems like it.
Well, I think that's enough for today. We'll just keep watching, and I think this quorum thing, yeah, they may have gotten it today, but as you mentioned, it's the end of the day on Thursday, so we'll see as this continues to evolve. we'll keep our finger on the pulse of this, and as it's a very dynamic situation and changing all the time, as is our COVID situation. So we'll continue
It
to watch
is.
that. Yeah.
And, if you're a parent or a teacher or you work at a school, we feel for y'all. Thank you again for all you do. And we just want y'all to stay safe. And that's kind of the purpose of why we're trying to fight so hard against folks like Abbott and Paxton and all the Republicans who don't want to keep y'all safe.
Exactly. Just keep talking to your family and make sure they're getting the vaccination, make sure they're getting the good information, and listening to medical experts. And
yes, the vaccine, it is free. It's
free.
It is safe.
Yeah.
There's no magnet in there. You're not gonna.
No. If you're afraid of anything, it should be this thing that you carry around on your hip all the time.
There's no microchip, but Bill Gates isn't targeting you.
No. So, well, with that, thanks again, everyone. Be sure to stay tuned to our coverage at texassignal.com. You can find this podcast anywhere you get podcasts. You know that because you're listening. But thanks again. And
can I just add one thing? We also have a totally new website.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Has been totally revamped. So check it out. We've even got a whole podcast section.
Yeah, it looks really great. I was really impressed. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's really sharp looking. So yeah, check it out. And that's the kind of thing we hope to continue to do, to evolve as this thing grows. And as we get your feedback. And so stay in touch with us on Twitter, join the conversation at Texas Signal on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And last thing we want to say is, of course, if you'd like to become a Patreon and help support the progressive journalism we do here, you can go to our website, texassignal.com, and at the top right, click the Become a Patron and help us get the word out. So thank you so much. And until next time, later, y'all.
Bye, guys.